Hello, everybody.
Very nice having you here.
Thank you so much. Glad you're here. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you so much, Brad. What's the congregation? Des Moines. Richmond, Des Moines.
Pastor here at Holy Trinity
Oh,
Church in Des Moines.
well, we're thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much. Good to see
Vice
you.
Principal at Holy Trinity.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Principal of Holy Trinity.
Wonderful to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you so much. Hey, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to shake everybody's hand before we go. How are you? What's your name?
Amber.
Hey, Amber.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to see you. What's your name?
Michelle.
Michelle. I can remember that.
Yes.
How are you? How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you, Phil. There's some bulldogs here, I can tell. They all look pretty fit. Good to see you. Nice to see you, Liam. How are you? Nice to see you. Hey, everybody have a seat. Have a seat. I'll catch you guys.
Jeff's uncle.
Jeff's uncle. Fantastic. Nice to see you. How are you? How are you? Good to see you. Thank you so much. It's good to be back. How are you? Thank you so much. Nice to see you. Good to see you. All right, why don't we get started, and I'll catch the other half of the room on the way out. Thank you so much for being here, and first of all, I just want to thank Jeff and Sandy and Tristan and Skylar for letting us use their backyard. So please give them a big round of applause. And since we are here, I should just say, go Bulldogs. I know how to work a crowd. I want to make sure that everybody also acknowledges your outstanding governor, Chet Culver, is here. The mayor of Des Moines, Frank County, is here. And State Representative Janet Peterson is here. All of whom are doing great work, and I had a chance to work with and get to know when I spent a few months here in Iowa a couple of years ago. It is wonderful to be back, and I thank all of you for coming. I am not going to give a long speech on the front end here. What I really want to do is hear from you. So what I'm going to do is just speak a little bit at the front end about where I think the country's at, how we move forward. It's relevant because there is an election coming up, although I'm going to try to avoid making just a straight political speech here. When I started running for president back in 2008, 2007, 2008, the reason I was willing to go into the race, even though Michelle was not crazy about politics, and I had two young daughters who are the center of my world and I was going to be away from for quite a bit, was a feeling that the country was at a crossroads, that we had some fundamental decisions to make that we had been putting off for decades. And there are a whole host of individual issues, education and energy and what we do in terms of our foreign policy, a whole bunch of discrete issues that concern me. What concerned me most, I think, was the nature of our economy and how the American dream seemed as if it was slipping away for too many people. From 2001 to 2009, the average wage of middle-class families in America actually declined by 5%. Job growth was slower during that period than at any time since World War II. At the same time as the costs of everything from health care to college tuition were skyrocketing. And so what you had was a situation in which the very top was getting very wealthy, but the middle class, which is the beating heart of our economy, and those aspiring to get into the middle class were finding it harder and harder to get ahead. And there were a range of reasons for that, but a lot of it had to do with a set of policies that had been put in place whose basic premise was that if we cut taxes, especially for millionaires and billionaires, and if we cut back on rules and regulations for how our industries and companies operate, and then we cut everybody loose to sort of to fend for themselves, that somehow the economy would automatically grow. And it didn't work. The other thing that was happening was that we were becoming less competitive internationally. So manufacturing jobs were moving overseas. You saw countries like China and India and Brazil investing heavily in their education systems and in infrastructure, and where we used to be ranked number 1, for example, in the proportion of college graduates, we now rank number 12. Where we used to have had the best public school system in the world, now our kids rank 21st in science and 25th in math. And so slowly, all the things that had made us the most productive country on earth were starting to slip away. And we were losing that competitive position. So what I said was, I'm going to run for president because there's some long-term things that we can do that will start growing our economy from the bottom up, make sure that the middle class is expanding, make sure that innovation and entrepreneurship is taking place in this country and not someplace else, that we can start rebuilding our economy so that it works for everybody. And that was really the platform that I ran on in 2008. And that meant that we had to have a school system that was serious about training our young people for the jobs of the future, which wasn't just a function of more money, by the way. It also meant reforming our school system so that it worked better. It meant that we made sure that every young person who worked hard and took responsibility was able to afford to go to college without accumulating some huge mountain of debt. It meant that we put much more emphasis on math and science and how we could develop new technologies in our economy and innovation. It meant that we started investing more in research and development. We used to typically invest about 3% of our gross domestic product in research and development. That started slipping. I said we had to get it back up. It meant that we invested in infrastructure that would lay the groundwork for a 21st century economy, not just roads and bridges, but also broadband lines, a smart electric grid that could make us more energy efficient. It meant that we had a new energy policy that would focus on clean energy, solar and wind and biodiesel. And it meant we had to fix our healthcare system, which was a huge drag on businesses and families and the federal government. It meant that we had to also get control of our spending and align what we take in and how much we spend at the federal government level so that it was sustainable. Now, that was just on domestic policy. We had a whole bunch of things we had to do on foreign policy, too. It turns out that we were in more trouble than we had even imagined in 2008. So that by the time I was sworn in January of 2009, a lot of these economic policies had culminated in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And I don't need to tell you how devastating that's been for people all across the country and here in Iowa. I mean, in the 6 months before I was sworn in, we lost 4 million jobs. The month I was sworn in, we lost 750,000 jobs. The month after that, 600,000. The month after that, 600,000. So we had already lost most of the 8 million jobs that we were going to end up losing in this recession before any of my economic policies even had a chance to take effect. And the financial system was on the verge of meltdown so that people couldn't even get loans to buy a car. Credit was just shut down. So we had to take a number of emergency measures. We stepped in and we stopped the bleeding. Now the economy is growing again. We've had private sector job growth for the last 8 months. Credit is now flowing again. although small businesses are still having a tough time getting credit. And so we've been focused. We signed a bill actually this week to help small businesses get credit and cut some of their taxes. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we've been able to prevent the economy from going into a second depression. But not only do we have a big hole that we've got to climb ourselves out of, we still have those 8 million jobs that were lost, and that's a lot of jobs to make up. The economy is still not growing as fast as it needs to. A lot of small businesses are still struggling. A lot of large businesses are just sitting on a lot of cash because they're still uncertain about whether to invest in the future. But all those other problems that we had, those didn't go away. The foundational problems, the structural problems in the economy that had led us to slip relative to other countries. So we've had a real challenge over the last couple of years of dealing with a crisis but not taking our eye off the ball in terms of some of the policies that we've got to change. And that's why financial reform was so important, so we never have to engage in taxpayer-funded bailouts again. That's why health reform was so important, because we had the opportunity not only to help ordinary folks have a better handle on their health care costs, but also that over time we can make the healthcare system as a whole more efficient and effective. That's why we've put so much emphasis on education reform. And this is one area where I think that we've actually gotten some compliments from Republicans because we are not taking an ideological approach. We're saying, how do we create more accountability in the system? How do we encourage better teachers in the classroom? How do we break through some of the bureaucracy to make sure our kids are learning what they need to learn? This is all by way of saying that the challenges the economy faces are still great, and they're not going to go away tomorrow or the next day. But we're on the right path. We're on the right track, as long as we stay focused on two things. Number one, that our economy only works when folks who are working hard, middle-class families, ordinary folks have opportunity, so that if they're doing the right thing, they're going to be able to support a family. They're going to be able to send their kids to a good school and send them to college. They're going to be able to retire with some dignity and respect. They're going to be able to afford health care and not go bankrupt when they get sick. That has to be the orientation. And everything we think about in terms of economic policy is, how do we make sure that if people are out here working hard and taking responsibility for themselves and their families, that they are rewarded? That's the essence of the American dream. And the second thing that we've got to keep in mind is that we've got to make tough choices if we're going to solve some of these long-term problems that we've been putting off. And that means putting aside some of the politics as usual. And it also means sometimes telling folks things they don't want to hear. Now, we're in election season, so that second part of the formula is very hard to apply. And I just want to say, and then I'm just going to open it up for comments and questions. When you look at the choice we face in this election coming up, the other side, what it's really offering is the same policies that from 2001 to 2009 put off hard problems and didn't really speak honestly to the American people about how we're going to get this country on track over the long term. And I just want to use as an example the proposal that they put forward with respect to tax policy. They want to borrow $700 billion to provide tax cuts for the top 2% of Americans, people making more than $250,000 a year. It would mean an average of $100,000 check to millionaires and billionaires. That $700 billion we don't have, so we'd either have to borrow it, which would add to our deficit, or we'd have to cut, just to give you an example, about 20% of the amount of money that we spend on education. We'd have to cut investments we've made in clean energy. We'd have to cut investments we've made in Head Start. We'd have to cut improvements in terms of student loans for kids going to college that would affect about 8 million kids.